Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding an important hearing. I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss legislation that I've co-authored with Senator Nelson of Florida to put a halt to cozy relationships with big oil and fundamentally reform the way we regulate big oil. I want to briefly call the committee's attention to the history of the creation of the Office of Thrift Supervision, which oversees AIG and other financial institutions involved in our current economic crisis, because I think the lessons learned there apply to the challenges we face in regulating these industries. Back in the late 1980s, savings and loans institutions were collapsing. The agency then regulating this industry, the Federal Home Loan Bank Board, started getting a lot of attention under public pressure. President Bush announced the closure of the agency and the creation of a successor agency. Attorneys from the office stepped out to watch the president speak. When they got back to the office, memos were waiting on their desks announcing the old agency had a new name, the Office of Thrift Supervision. Sure, some of the rules changed and some of the leadership got replaced, but the culture of lax oversight, laissez-faire, let the market control itself attitude that helped contribute to our financial meltdown largely stayed the same. I want to make sure that what we do to regulate these industries is more than just a name change. And so I think the committee well knows that I have real concerns about the expansion of offshore drilling as an inherently risky enterprise, as we are seeing all too clearly in the BP disaster in the Gulf. In my mind, expanded drilling means expanded risks. But if we must drill, then I think we need real reform to address the problems we know exist, and there are a multitude, as we've seen in several Interior Department Inspector General reports that revealed shocking behavior by officials at the Minerals Management Service during the last administration. Beyond the sex and drug use that occurred, MMS employees accepted gifts like sporting event tickets, hunting trips from the very people they were supposed to oversee. One MMS inspector conducted 4 inspections on oil platforms belonging to a company that was attempting to and eventually did hire him. Some MMS employees held outside employment with oil and gas interests while on the job as regulators. And as outrageous as it may sound, inspectors actually allowed oil and gas personnel to fill out platform inspection forms in pencil before the inspectors traced them over in pen. These cozy relationships are summed up in the attitude displayed by the manager of MMS's Lake Charles, Louisiana office, who said, quote, "Obviously, we're all oil industry. Obviously, we are all oil industry." I think you have to think about that statement, and you have to think that that simply has to change. I'm concerned, Mr. Chairman, that nothing seems to have been learned yet. The AP, the New York Times, I should say, reported yesterday that BP's Liberty project off the coast of Alaska is being exempted from the moratorium on Arctic drilling because the drilling rig will sit on an artificial island connected to land by a causeway that BP built. That somehow makes it a, quote, onshore project. But BP is going to drill under the Arctic Ocean, and it will do so using a risky drilling technique that MMS itself says is more prone to blowouts. That's bad enough. But then we also learned that MMS regulators back in 2007 allowed BP to write its own environmental review, which looks almost identical to the federal environmental review. My legislation increases the penalties for these sorts of false representations by regulators. How many of these sorts of incidents do we need to uncover to get serious about the integrity of how we regulate big oil? The legislation I'm proposing imposes tough but obviously necessary sanctions to end these cozy relationships. It prohibits regulators from accepting gifts from industry, increases the penalty for doing so. It closes the revolving door by making it a felony for an oversight official to take an industry job within 2 years of leaving the agency. It stiffens the penalty for regulators making fraudulent statements or false statements. It cracks down on financial conflicts of interest by prohibiting regulators from working for industry at the same time. It requires financial disclosure by senior regulators, and we think that those are all essential to create a sense of integrity, to create integrity and an opportunity to have the public's confidence restored. I ask, Mr. Chairman, consent to enter into the record a letter of the Project on Government Oversight that is supporting this legislation. It is one of our good government groups, and I appreciate that Senators Stabenow and Klobuchar have joined us as co-sponsors. Finally, I know Secretary Salazar from the start of his tenure as Interior Secretary has been attempting to address ethics at MMS and continues to do so. I appreciate and commend his efforts, but it seems to me that we need to codify reform into law. My concern is that a future administration may very well not be as interested in keeping an arm's length relationship between itself and big oil. So I hope and look forward to working with the chairman as we incorporate some of these ideas as we move forward to make sure that we have the integrity that is necessary, not just for integrity itself, but for the purposes of ensuring that we have a system that ultimately does not give us another situation as we have, another disaster as we have in the Gulf. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, good to see you. Let me ask you a question. A whole host of the 33 drilling companies that are covered by the moratorium, several of them are worth less than $1 billion. So if, in fact, God forbid, one of them would spill, their liability right now would be $75 million, not the cleanup, but the liability. Now, what would happen if that was still the law?
Well, as you know, Senator Menendez, the President of the administration, have supported a change in the law. In addition, I know that you are considering legislation with respect to additional financial assurances for these companies to be able to make sure that problems that they create are in fact dealt with, and that's something that
I appreciate that, but my point simply is, wouldn't it be a true statement that but for your moratorium, if one of those entities worth less than $1 billion had a spill and the law had not been changed, right now they'd be subject only to a $75 million liability cap?
That is correct.
And so therefore, your moratorium not only figures out how to move forward in a way that is safer, because I know that the administration still has a view that we have to have drilling, but the bottom line is until we either change the liability cap or have a safer process, we run the risk, if we were to lift this moratorium tomorrow and one of these entities would spill, they'd only have a $75 million liability cap, and they're not a BP, and the risk would be equally as high. So I think it's something for all of us to think about how important it is what is going on here. It's great to know that BP can pay for its massive mess, but there are other entities that clearly could not. The New York Times reported yesterday that BP's Liberty project off the coast of Alaska is being exempted from the moratorium on Arctic drilling because the drilling rig is going to sit on an artificial island connected to land by a causeway that BP built. That somehow makes it a, quote, onshore project. But BP is going to drill under the Arctic Ocean. It will do so using a risky drilling technique that MMS itself says is more prone to blowouts, which seems to me to be bad enough. But then we learned that MMS regulators back in 2007, before you took office, allowed BP to write its own environmental review, which looks almost identical to the federal environmental review. Isn't this something we should be looking at? Isn't this the very essence of what we want to change at MMS?
Senator Menendez, we are looking at that issue right now. In fact, I have asked Mike Bromwich to take a look at it, and even though he's new on the job, I'm going to ask him to comment on the issue that you raised in Alaska.
Well, Senator, sorry.
Yes, please, go ahead.
I was first made aware of this issue when I looked at the article at 5 o'clock this morning. I don't know that much about the specifics there. I can tell you that we've already called out to our regional office in Alaska, and we will get to the bottom of it very quickly. Now, my understanding is that companies in this case BP, submit their own environmental analyses, and that's as it should be. But the responsibility for doing the NEPA reviews belongs to my agency, which is supposed to do an independent review, which can certainly take account of and include the environmental analysis that the company submits, but it's not bound by it, and it's required to do its own independent work and make its own independent judgments. I'm troubled by the suggestion that that was not done here. That is what I'm going to get to the bottom of, but right now I don't have the answers for you.
Well, I look forward to the answers because, you know, we have a history of MMS allowing, for example, on inspections, the Inspector General, where they let the company go ahead in pencil do the inspection report, and then the MMS inspectors just filled it in, in ink over the penciled part. That's the whole history. That's why we have to change the nature. And I know the Secretary's been doing a whole host of things. I hope that we'll look at some of the elements that are all being offered here. My legislation to close the revolving door. Right now, you know, between regulators and big oil, what prohibits an inspector from signing off BP's exploratory plan today and accepting a job with BP tomorrow? Nothing. Under existing rules, if an inspector was inspecting a Transocean rig, would they be prohibited from negotiating for a job with Shell? No. These are the sort of things that I think that were pointed out in the IG report and that we need to respond to. But I particularly want to look forward to hearing your results on this. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for what you've begun to do in this whole respect with MMS. It's critical in order to both have safety for whatever drilling is going to take place. You know that my views on drilling, which are quite different than the majority of this committee, but nonetheless, we have to have a process that's safe, and we have to have integrity in the system at the end of the day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.